Hello, welcome to the Fantastic Fiction at KGB reading series. Fantastic Fiction is a monthly speculative fiction reading series held on the third Wednesday of every month, hosted by Ellen Datlow and me, Matthew Kressel. We spotlight well-known and up-and-coming science fiction, fantasy, and horror authors, and admission is always free. We publish a monthly podcast and video so people who can't attend the in-person event can still enjoy the readings. If you'd like to support the series, you can donate at kgbfantasticfiction.org/support. Anyway, on to the show.
All right, everybody, here we go. Welcome all. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this rainy, thunderstormy night. Welcome to the Fantastic Fiction at KGB reading series here in the historical, super cool KGB bar. I am David Mercure Rivera, and I have the honor of co-hosting this month's reading along with my fabulous co-hosts, Amy Goldschlager. Amy is a veteran of hosting reading series, and she'll fill you in on that when she talks later. We meet here every second Wednesday of the month to bring you voices from the speculative fiction writing community, and this month we're featuring two incredible talents, Cassandra Khaw and Debra K. So this reading series has been running for well over 25 years now, and it was established by Terry Bisson and Alice K. Turner back in the late 90s, and is currently run by longtime hosts, editor Ellen Datlow and writer Matthew Kressel. Ellen and Matt are both out of town this month, attending Worldcon in Seattle. So Amy and I have stepped in as guest hosts. And all bets are off this month. We can do whatever the hell we want. So just expect some craziness.
Except I'm still afraid of Ellen.
Yes, except we're afraid of Ellen still, yes. We release a free podcast where we post audio recordings of the monthly readings. So you can go to kgbfantasticfiction.org. You can listen there. Thanks to Gordon Linsner for all of his help with that, as always. Thanks, Gordon. This reading series is free. There's no cover charge. All that we ask is that you buy drinks, hard or soft, and tip our terrific bartender, Mary. Thanks, Mary.
And also just a Kickstarter. We're not GoFundMe.
Okay, that's what keeps the series running in this venue, so please buy drinks. And as Amy just reminded me, we are currently running a GoFundMe with the goal of keeping KGB running for another 4 years. We do have costs, about $3,500 a year. We pay a small stipend to our guests and take them out to dinner after the readings. So if you can donate a small amount, you just go to GoFundMe.com and search for Fantastic Fiction at KGB, and we'd really appreciate that. So with all that out of the way, I'd like to introduce our first reader of the evening, and that is Thunder. The thunder says it all. It's Debra K. Debra K. is an author of horror, thrillers, and stories with twisted perspectives. Her 2024 psychological horror debut, Deena Undone, has won multiple awards, most notably an American Fiction Award, a Storytrade Book Award, and a Page Turner Award. A Spanish edition will be released in 2025 by Dilatando Mentes. Her short stories have been published in literary magazines and anthologies by Hippocampus Press, Fairfield Scribes, Etched Onyx, Fractured Lit, and Querencia Press. Debra spent years as a professional opera singer and enjoys using those sensibilities in her work. She lives amongst the rolling hills and pastures of upstate New York with her husband and quirky cattle dog, Bad Dog Bob, where she endlessly strives to write one perfectly balanced sentence. Ladies and gentlemen, Debra K. Every.
Wow, can I get here without tripping? I don't know. Yes, you can.
Hello. All right. My first time here. Pretty terrific. You know, I assume you know when you're invited here, you get up to 25 minutes of time. It's a world of time, especially for somebody who's got the short attention span that I do, which I do. So I decided that for 25 minutes, I was going to do three things. It's sort of be appetizer, main course, and dessert. So for an appetizer, I'm going to do a short excerpt from Deena Undone. Deena Undone. Whoops. Shameful plugging. If anybody wants to grab, I have bookmarkers, I have QR codes, I'll sell you my children, I'll do your windows, whatever it takes. Anyway, so this is a short excerpt, and just to give you a sense of what this book is about, Deena Undone is a psychological horror novel. It is centered around the expectations and secrets of a Syrian-American family. And these unresolved issues fester to the point where Agatha Haddad, who is a very bitter old woman, makes a deal with an ancient entity called the Sensu, whose stock in trade is attacking a person's senses one by one. She's been promised health and an extended life in the exchange for one evil act, the killing of her niece, Deena. There's nothing like Deena and Debra, they're not the same person. I just want you to know it's not the same person. But anyway, so this happens pretty much early on in the book. Deena has tremendous guilt after not being there for her mother during her long illness and death. She gets a second chance, taking care of her Aunt Agatha, who is abusive and dying. But strange things are happening. Her hearing was attacked when she was at the Brixton Playhouse where she works. She worries it's her imagination, which makes her question her sanity. And here we go. Deena was just about asleep when a scream startled her awake. She bolted upright with her breathing coming in fast, shallow bursts until a vision across from her bed stopped that breathing in its tracks. The opposite wall was gone, replaced by a dark house overgrown with brambles. 2 large oak trees grew on either side, their shadows deepening the house's gloom. The smell of her mother's perfume floated toward the bed. There, in the 3rd floor window, was her mother looking out at Deena. She seemed not angry. Worried was more like it. She was trying to say something, but Deena couldn't make out her words. It must have been important, because Zara's hands were balled into fists, and her head was craned forward. Deena tried to get out of bed, but her legs wouldn't move, and the familiar beginnings of a panic attack took over. The trembling in her hands, the beeping of the horn, the pressure in her head. She focused on her breathing in an effort to gain control, and she just about managed when she sensed the air collapsing in on itself. The sound from Brixton Playhouse entered the room like an approaching train, quietly at first, then growing louder. But the taunting laughter wasn't taunting anymore. It was maniacal, taking over the inside of her head. This was unfinished business. It had been interrupted at Brixton, and somehow Deena knew it was angry. It wanted to hurt her, to scare her until all reason had been stripped away. The laughter bounced against the sides of her skull, came out from her eyes, rolled around her tongue, vibrated through her hair. Deena screamed with the pain of it as she felt herself falling into a deep, dark hole. And then a different sound joined in. Well, not a scream or a squeal or a laugh. It was a song Deena remembered from when she was young, and even though it was sung quietly, it rode above the cacophony, lilting and rocking, and with each note, the laughter inside her head peeled away and fell to the floor until all that was left were the blessed strains of that long-ago melody. She sat, panting, her face, neck, and chest slick with sweat. When she looked up, she caught sight of a movement from the 3rd floor window of the imagined house. Her mother was holding a baby, and Deena knew exactly who it was. It was her. It was Deena. Zara brought her face close to the baby's cheek and kissed it as she hummed the Syrian lullaby Deena had heard more times than she could remember. She rocked the baby back and forth, until it dropped off to sleep. She then turned her face up to Deena and smiled. Deena's grief was so deep and so wide, her throat swelled with the size of it. She wanted to lie next to her mother one more time. She wanted to talk about all she had missed. She wanted to reverse time and share a cup of coffee and laugh about this or that. She wanted to thank her for the rescue. And she wanted to say, "I'm sorry." That's it. Thank you. Main course. Yes. This song, damn it, old habits die hard. This story is called The Big Idea. It's a new story, and you'll be getting an abridged version of it. And it's funny because last night I was thinking about what I was bringing here tonight, and I realized that the first two stories have to do with sound. So I guess I got a theme going here. I don't only write stories about sound. I just want to get that out there. So anyway, this is called The Big Idea. Anna was fired up, and the more she turned the idea over in her bed, the more excited she got. She had to share it with somebody. She locked her apartment door, ran down 4 flights of stairs, and out into the street toward Bar 21. Jack and Suzanne were probably into their second round by now. 30 minutes later, she was standing in the entryway of a crowded bar filled with 20-somethings, carrying more energy than cash. She scanned the room and spotted her friends sitting in a back booth sharing a pitcher. Anna waded through the smell of fried food and old beer, pulled up a chair, and grabbed a glass. "Ah, geez," said Jack, eyeing her up and down. "I know that look. Disheveled hair, wrinkled clothes. We're in for one of Anna's music masterclasses." "What are you talking about?" said Anna, pouring herself a beer. "Let me put it this way, darling. When you finally finish this grad thesis, we should be listed as co-authors." Oh, the crack put a smirk on Suzanne's face. "We love you, babe, but psychoacoustic properties of music? Not even a Shakespeare could make that shit interesting." "But wait till you hear what I'm working on," said Anna. I think I've really got something." All right, said Suzanne. "Go ahead." "So how is it that music can make us feel excited or nostalgic or whip us into a frenzy? What makes it do that?" "I'll bite," said Jack. "What?" "It's the frequencies, the vibrations. I'm convinced that if I can find the right frequencies, I know it could move people into a place of peace." Jack and Suzanne let go of a laugh. "Listen to me," said Anna. "We're all in the shit. Anger and violence. The world is fucked." Suzanne leaned back and crossed her arms. "All right, sweetheart. So you're talking about what? A song that makes people happy?" "No, it's more than that. The right song with the right frequency could calm people down so much they'd actually stop fighting. They'd start getting along." Suzanne groaned. "For Christ's sake." "Relax, Suzanne," said Jack. "This is Anna's pop culture mysticism stage. She'll grow out of it." They laughed and joked and ordered another pitcher, leaving Anna to wonder why she'd ever thought these people were her friends. She sat quietly with her beer untouched and soon got up to leave. When she got home, she peeled off her coat, walked past the books, papers, and half-finished manuscripts, and sat at her piano by the window. "Fuck 'em," she thought. "She may not find the answer this week or this month, but that song was out there." It was a great first night of work. Anna scrawled notes on neat manuscript, filling the 5-line staff with all manner of combinations. Well, this wasn't jazz riffs or progressive songs or classical music. They were strings of melody meant to be sung, ropes of golden sound that Anna envisioned would float over entire cities, calming the beasts of anger. She worked through to the next day, and the next turned into a week. And when she ran out of paper, she scrawled her thoughts on the wall next to her piano, and the opposite wall, and the wall by the front door, and the one by the window. Soon the apartment was covered with 5-line staves, bulging with notes. But it wasn't working. Well, she needed more time, more space. Anna pulled up the carpet and wrote on the floor. She pulled out her ladder and wrote on the ceiling. She surrounded herself with music, above, below. Anna. Maybe, no. Well, maybe if she got closer to the music, the human component had to be a part of it. Anna wrote music up her one arm and down the other, on her thighs, down her neck, her face, her feet, her calves, the soles of her feet. Closer, she thought. She dug the notes into her skin, leaving trickles of blood that punctuated one note here and another note there. And with each cut of the pen, she could feel the sound seeping deeper into her skin. But still, nothing. And then one morning, a little help came her way. Well, Anna had fallen asleep at the piano with her face planted on the keys as she'd done the night before and the night before that. And when she woke, her back was stiff and her hip was screaming. When she touched her face, there was an indentation where the keys had pressed into her cheek. It wasn't until she was in mid-stretch that she focused on the apartment. The 5-lined musical staves that she'd wrote onto every surface had multiplied, not on the walls or the ceiling, but across the expanse of the room, going vertically from floor to ceiling, horizontally from wall to wall. There were staves running diagonally, side to side, top to bottom, and Anna was in the middle of it all, embraced within a spider's web of lines that shimmered in the morning light. The staves then gave off a humming sound, soothing, comforting. She closed her eyes and listened, and before long she realized it wasn't a hum at all. It was a multitude of voices chanting in unison. She held her breath so as to hear their message. Yes, there it was. A single sentence whispered in a cascade of sound, with one voice starting, joined by the next, and then the next. She strained to hear what they were saying, but the sentence was too jumbled. It was so frustrating. The answer was there, ready to be plucked. And then, like a photo emerging from a photographer's chemical bath, the sentence slowly appeared. Sacrificing your most prized possession, sacrificing your most prized possession is the answer. Well, of course. Well, there has to be a cost to any great endeavor. Anna smiled at the simplicity, the sublime solution to what she'd been trying to create. Once their message had been delivered, the staves bent and crumbled, disintegrating into dust and falling to the floor. A breeze picked up the dust. It floated into the air, surrounding Anna's head, caressing her cheek, and lifting her hair into a golden halo around her face. Then it blew out the window and into the morning air. When the apartment was quiet, she sat at the piano, not sure she had the courage to do what needed to be done. But she'd been through so much. She couldn't let her work go to waste. Anna grabbed the pencil lying on the piano, took a steadying breath, and jammed it into her left ear. And like a walker on hot coals, she felt no pain. Oh, well, Anna was giddy now. She pulled the pencil out and with no hesitation plunged it into her right ear. She could actually hear the pop of her eardrum. And to make sure she had hit her mark, she pushed it in again and then again until profound quiet. Well, drops of blood traveled down the sides of her face, but it didn't matter. She was now wrapped in a deafness as complete as a darkened cave. She then opened her mouth and sang. Well, she heard none of it, but she knew it was right, so she continued. She opened her eyes and looked out the window. There, standing on the sidewalk, looking up at her window, was a little girl smiling. Anna sang again. Well, the girl was joined by a man in a gray suit, and an old woman bent in on herself, and a truck driver who'd left his truck in the middle of the street with the door open, and a policeman, and a mother with a baby, and a morning jogger, and a kid on rollerblades. Their faces were turned up toward her window with the most extraordinary look of peace. And Anna kept singing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Little Elvis Presley. All right, so this last thing I'm doing, it's dessert. It's dessert. And this is my metronome. So this story was done as a story slam a couple of years ago for Woodstock Book Fest. And it is meant to be with metronome. And from what I understand, the metronome is not going to read on the YouTube video. So I'm going to do a little clapping also. But I'm doing the metronome because the metronome is cool. I mean, it's just cool. Let me just tune it. Yeah, it's tuned. So anyway. All right. So it's called In a Bar. And it is a study in cliches, for what it's worth. Am I good? Yeah? All right. Sitting in a bar, forlorn, lonely, alone again, doing the old find a man disco. It's that moment in Amarcord, Uncle Teo in a tree. I want a woman. Is the reference too obscure? Is Fellini finally gone, no longer in our collective lexicon? I sit on the stool in my tree, screaming, I want a man. And the night is ticking, talking, melting in a pan. I sit waiting. Waiting for what? Waiting for a man. Pay attention. And then, summoned by the night from the earth, giving birth to an option, a hope, a man comes in. Unkempt, dusty around the edges, not my type. But opposites attract, yes, no, maybe. So I say to myself, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Don't judge a book by its cover, even though my mother whispers, clothes make the man. You wouldn't, couldn't, shouldn't, bada bing, bada boom. Ignore the voice. You only live once. Life is short. Grab the apple, take a bite. Bite me, Mom. And the night is ticking, talking, melting in a pan. He nods. I smile. Want a drink? You bet. Sitting at the bar, pretending that we care. He tells me where he's from. I tell him what I do. The game's afoot. But it's just a game. No shit, Sherlock. And the night is tick, 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 tick. So it's 10 o'clock. 11. Nearly there, nearly there. Looks like we're headed with that one-night stand. Not bad for an old broad. Give the lady a hand. My place? Yours? Always the same question. Too many to remember, too many to count, and all the same faces. Mouth open, eyes closed, lips, tongue. Then morning comes with a predictable, I wouldn't, couldn't, shouldn't have, but I did, and what about this time? I wait for the question, knowing that when it comes, it'll be with that look. Oh, I could call it hunger, or I could call it greed, but that would be a cliche, and we can't have that. We can't have that. Come on, boys, step right up. Hurry, hurry, 1, 2, a customer. But before my mistake, we take a detour. Walking through the door comes little Miss 30. Only sounds old if you're 20, but I'm way past 20 and I'm way past 30. I'm old enough to know better. And what do I know? What I know is 50 may look good in the glow of a bar, but only if it's the only game in town. So Mr. Dusty Edges looks at little Miss 30 with a wink and a smile. And the night is tick, tock, tick, tock. Tick, 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 melting in a pan, sitting on my bar stool, sitting. lonely, alone, lone, 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 again.
Seriously, all broad. Thanks for such an entertaining reading there. And I have to ask you a trick about how you read the story. Did you memorize the story? That was amazing.
No, I didn't memorize any of it. No, it's a parlor trick.
Wow, very impressive. You never looked up, never looked down. You were constantly looking at the audience. Very impressive. We're going to take a brief 15-minute break, and then we'll come back with Cassandra Khaw. Thanks.
Hey, I think we're going to get started again. All right. Hi, I'm Amy Goldschlager. You may know me as guest host for such reading as the New York Review of Science Fiction reading series, the Brooklyn Books and Booze, and if you like that one, you're going to see that one again a lot. The Shade Night of Wonder and Terror, which I did twice, and now this, and I just have to say, this is like a long-term life goal for me. Matt and Ellen know that I have been begging to do this for several years now. This is like, a tick mark off for me, so I'm very happy. So thanks for all being here for that. So before we get started with our next reader, I want to announce the next set of upcoming readers so you know what to come back for. On September 10th, we've got Fran Wild and Shiva Kumar. On October 8th, we've got Leanna Renee Heber and Shveta Tharkar. On November 12th, we've got Lara Donnelly and Mary Robinette Cowell. On December 10th, we've got Daniel Bram and our favorite reader, TBA. And on January 14th, we've got Rachel Harrison and Robert Atone. So those are all really awesome. And again, thank you for coming tonight. And, again, continue to help by buying drinks and donating to the GoFundMe. And if you want to support the actual hosts of this series, you could buy one of Ellen's many, 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 many anthologies. And also, Matthew Kressel's got a new book out called Space Trucker Jess, which is awesome. It is really, really fun. It really actually isn't about trucking very much at all. But it is incredibly entertaining and thoughtful, so I recommend it highly. All right. So, our next and second and final reader is Cassandra Khaw, the USA Today bestselling and Bram Stoker Award-winning author of The Library at Hellebore, which Facebook keeps trying to remind me about how I should read because it keeps giving me that little video. Nothing But Blackened Teeth, The Salt Grows Heavy, Breakable Things, and co-author of The Dead Take the A Train with Richard Kadrey. And I like to think about that one is, let's take the themes from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but add magic. Because basically it's about men sucking, essentially. It could tell me I'm wrong. Because it's just, the original title of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is Men Who Hate Women. And yes, and when I read that book, I just kept thinking about that. I thought that was really fascinating. Anyway, Khaw is also an award-winning game writer, and now you get to listen to her instead of me, which I know is what you really want.
Hello? Yeah, that works. I'm going to be reading an excerpt tonight from... Sorry, I'm just following the direction of the microphone. From the next novella I'm doing. It's coming out next year. It's called Find Me Where It Ends. And for those that have read my work before, it is probably the first thing I've ever written that has no gore whatsoever. Yeah, not a single drop or clot of bloodied meat. That said, brief content warning, this particular book and this particular excerpt does talk about suicidal ideation, suicide, and so on. So if it is something that you're uncomfortable with, I totally understand if you want to take your drink and hide outside the bar for the moment. But without further ado. The black dog arrived at Antigone's stoop about an hour after daybreak and laid there as dawn bled its syrupy golden light over its dark pelt, the air sweltering already, warm and damp as the animal's mouth. If there'd been anyone there to see the dog, they would have said that it looked like an exemplary example of a German Shepherd, not show quality. As it was longer in the muzzle and limbs, there was also something in the eyes, too, that a judge might have maligned but wouldn't have put to paper, unwilling to risk their attention, than breed standards preferred. But gorgeously vital nonetheless, a handsome beast who'd flourish under the attentive care of a well-resourced owner. More importantly, perhaps, as they watched it drape itself over the cobbled steps, they would have said it looked happy. And it was. Though a psychopomp first, it was still a dog second. And even if it wasn't alive in the traditional sense, even if it was more analogy than flesh, an idea given breath and bone and boundless affection for one solitary thing in the lonely cosmos, it was nonetheless alive enough to relish being warm. The small things mattered. They always did. Antigone opened the door just as the dog rolled onto its back, tongue lolling out of its mouth, the red muzzle obscene against the shining black of its coat. At the sight of the creature, the witch let out a breath like she'd been struck. "Shut," she said. The dog's ears pricked in her direction. She stared at it for another minute, taking occasional sips from a toothed yellow mug of tea she held in an increasingly rattly hand, the words "world's best aunt" flaking from its surface. There'd been a time when Antigone's bloodline had been unburdened with blessings, or at least that was what the records she had inherited suggested. Most of her predecessors had suffered nothing more than an affinity for herbalism, a gift they used to tremendous effect, all of them doulas and veterinarians and doctors to a woman. But then, around the time of Antigone's great-grandmother, something changed. Suddenly, they lost their uncanny acumen for sifting through the wilderness for what was needful, no more talent for finding herbs under a reef of snow or knowing the precise temperature a poultice needed to be brewed. No, they began seeing their depths instead. Not in importance, nor in the patterns of the stars, not in the way the tea leaves clumped in the bottom of their cups, but as dogs of varying shapes, cold-eyed hounds who would come as their ends slunk closer. It was a petty and purposeless miracle, useless even as an indicator as to when one was meant to tidy their affairs. The canines sometimes came days before their deaths, sometimes months, little more than ambulatory memento moris, which, honestly, what was the point of that? It was something Antigone often wondered. Everyone knew they were going to die. She supposed these psychopomps, always dogs, always black as the inside of a casket or the belly of an urn, must do something other than announce that the clock of their lives would stop. Maybe they solved the process somehow, provided comfort, protection through the transition between worlds. Certainly, her grandmother's death made it seem possible. The old woman had known she was going to die about 6 months before the dog began announcing its presence with nightly baying, a cacophony she met with pinch-mouth frustration, the cancer having licked what sentimentality she had left out from inside her bones. "Like I don't know it's there," she'd rasp, scowling out the window at her death, a small black terrier who Antigone had secretly quite liked. Despite its noisomeness, it never did more than sit primly beside a streetlight in view of Antigone's grandmother's hospital room, waiting with the practiced dignity of an upscale chauffeur, little tail wagging erratically, like a heart running out of hours. And Antigone had thought, perhaps, if dying was as gentle and soft as the animal looked, there was no reason to be afraid of it. She was in the room when her grandmother passed at last, a week after the dog came to wait below her window. And it was as tender a death as Antigone could have hoped for the old woman, as anyone could have aspired to. It had been one long, stuttering breath, and that was all. Despite this, Antigone's mother had taken no chances when her death came one bright, freezing morning 10 years later, a massive, rust-eyed cane corso who had somehow let itself into her apartment while she was asleep. At the sight of it, she had allegedly, Antigone had nothing but a woman's letters to go by, finished her coffee, sought out the revolver she kept in her desk, wrote several extensive letters of instruction to Antigone and several long letters of apology to her sister. Most of her missives to Antigone detailed the logistics of accessing her estate. One explained in frank but nearly bored terms that she regretted leaving Lisa but wasn't about to take her chances when her death looked so monstrous, and she was certain Antigone could be a reasonable caretaker. She invited her eldest to prove her wrong, but expressed hope she would not. Then she presumably shot herself. According to the coroner, she had done so with the same precision that permeated the rest of her life. Her death was near instantaneous by all accounts, a revelation Antigone might have found cold comfort in if she had not also been 32. Old enough to be relatively unflustered by the funerary arrangements that followed, but young enough still to feel grossly betrayed by this turn of events. Years later, she would wonder if the dogs were prescriptive of the grief that would result from said death, but the thought depressed her too much to keep it. So Antigone buried it with her mother's remains. And now here she was, 40 with her death stretched outside her door, a mug of tea cooling in her right hand. "Well," said Antigone, after a few more minutes, "I suppose you might as well come inside." To her surprise, Antigone found some comfort in how quickly her death made itself at home on her couch, draping itself over a corner. Its pelt had a refractive quality, she realized, a grackle-like iridescence that made it slightly less real than it should have been. It was quiet, too, and odorless, none of which were qualities she anticipated. Antigone had expected the thing to gnaw upon the cushions, to chew apart the tassels of her throw pillows, to autopsy the massive knitted merino blanket her last boyfriend had abandoned along with the relationship. Instead, it just stared at her with doting patience, one paw crossed over another. "It doesn't seem like it's planning to leave anytime soon," said Antigone, as the great orange cat that haunted her garden flattened itself against the window to stare at the dog. Antigone could almost hear her sister Lisa shrug in answer. It had been several years since the two had met in person. Lisa loved the desert more than she did anything else in the world, something Antigone had found as incomprehensible as their mother's suicide. But alien as the whole thing was, she understood. Just because she found something unpalatable, it didn't mean everyone else would share a similar aversion. One woman's yuck was another's yum, or something like that. "Death and taxes are the only two constants in the world," said Lisa, exhaling. She'd picked up a nicotine habit after learning it wouldn't be a respiratory situation that ultimately took her out, explaining to Antigone that even if it was a repellent vice, it seemed almost offensive to not indulge when she had a kind of immunity to the consequences. "I'm living the life all those smokers wish they could have." Antigone laughed. She couldn't help herself. Her death thumped its tail against a pillow, and there was weight to the noise she hadn't expected either. "But why is it here now?" "I suppose not for a long time yet. said her sister firmly. "You know that." This wasn't untrue. It wasn't the whole of it, but neither was it untrue. Antigone and Lisa had spent a year reviewing the possibilities, anticipating them, the many routes to their waiting deaths. And while Antigone had stopped before she could verify any specifics, she knew it'd be a long, long time for her. Longer, she'd secretly thought, than she might want it to be. Long enough for her to beg before the end. And yet here the dog was. "If that's true," said Antigone, "why is it on my couch? Maybe it just wanted to remind you it's there?" Unable to answer, Antigone redirected their conversation to banalities. Antigone's garden. The garden's gardening, as the youth might say. As the youth might say, Annie, God, we are getting old. Her nephew's 4th birthday, and how he had demanded skulls from the guests. It was that day in the dunes when the buzzards showed him their museum. He became obsessed after that. The speed with which autumn was approaching, how climate change colored the foliage early. We're probably the last generation to have a relatively normal life, I am afraid. Musings about retirement because neither of them were young any longer. The dog's proof it's time to think about that, said her sister, with her usual brisk heartlessness. "I bet mine will be here next year to make a point." Antigone's plan for adopting kittens, just taking the cat in your backyard. Who cares if it belongs to someone else? It clearly wants you to adopt it. Didn't you say it was leaving you gifts? Interesting little hagstones instead of dead birds? Her sister's aspirations of owning a parrot. "You'll probably outlive us all," said Antigone. "And then you'll just be alone, an immortal flying toddler with claws and a bad temper." Her sister's laughter broke over the call like a river through an old dam. "Unless Johan wants to get married one day. God, I hope he does. It was so fucking funny if he and his spouse had to deal with that because my last wishes included be nice to the bird." "That's your son you're talking about. It took 20 hours to deliver him. I call this payback." They said their "I loves you" shortly after that, promising to call again soon, knowing they would forget. But it was the thought, as always, that counted, the knowledge that in an emergency, the other would be there, even if they, Lisa more than her sister, but she was the artist of their family, were inconsistent with their check-ins, their how are yous and holiday cards. And Antigone hung up. The silence opened like a maw. It was evening now somehow, the hours having ran from her like the hair from the hounds. The sun puddled on her living room floor. It looked like melted butter on the bright carpet, or maybe warm fat. Her death was still there, watchful, swallowed by the growing shadows. "What do you want?" It kept staring. "If you're not here to take me away, what are you doing?" In answer, it let out thin, impatient whine, pouring from the couch onto the carpet. As it moved, Antigone saw proof again of what it was. Its pelt seemed to eat the evening light. It was a negative space, a hole cut into the universe in the shape of a dog. Or would be if not for those amber eyes, like coins for the ferryman, the luster rubbed out of them by desperate hands. "Go away," tried Antigone. Her deaf whined again, and whatnot. Over the next few weeks, Antigone would discover, much to her relief, that while her deaf would eat bacon from her hand, it didn't have an actual digestive system per se. There was no cause to walk it around her neighborhood, although more days than not she did so anyway, discovering in the process a queer pleasure in its company, a kind of pride in her own brazenness. Here she was, not only aware of her mortality, but bold enough to keep it company. "Look," she sometimes thought of saying to her neighbors as she passed them by, "Look at how my deaf trots leashless beside me, inert to distraction. Look at how brave I am to walk it like I'm its master." Very soon, the summer began yielding to fall, a leaf at a time, and Antigone found herself startled at how quickly the trees became sheened with red and gold. The days like thread unspooling through her fingers. She couldn't seem to hold on to any of it. Somehow this was her 8th year in the town. For most of her life, she disdained suburban living, even once branding it as anemic, when her mother suggested Antigone move into the house opposite her own. But then the older woman died, and her sister had been too pregnant to do the work of sorting through the former's personal effects. So Antigone, ironically, moved into her mother's home instead of its mirror, which sat vacant still save for its ghost stories. She never intended to stay. Had only wanted to linger for as long as it was necessary to unravel the knot the dead made of their lives once they were gone. But the months and the weeks and the days twisted together like fibers of a rope until they pulled taut around her, and suddenly she was bound. 8 years. Whenever Antigone thought too hard about it, she could feel a scream ballooning in her chest, so she didn't. It wasn't all bad, though. The house, once shucked of her mother's possessions, was spacious enough to accommodate all of her passions, including the tidy storing of them. And the garden, well, it loved her better than even a wife might have. As for the town, it had coffee shops and a pretty cinema, rocailled and stuccoed to an inch of its life, its insides frescoed with faded recreations of Michelangelo's best works. There was a bookstore as well, run by a leaf-eyed girl who was fastidious about making sure the shop was stocked with the best and the latest queer literature. A pottery school, a dance academy, a Whole Foods, an ice cream parlor, an antique store, even an art gallery that would occasionally showcase internationally feted, if incredibly niche work. No, it wasn't a bad life here, but it felt like a hand-me-down from someone who'd never met her, far too tight around her throat. Antigone thought about this, and more as she led her deaf to and fro, back and forth across her life, while passerbys cooed about how well-mannered it was, how restrained, how intelligent. Once in a while, one would ask, gently, like the question was something fragile, "Aren't you a cat person, though?" And Antigone would smile laconically in reply, shrugging. "Things change," she would say, wondering why each time the words felt like a goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra, and thank you, Debra, and thank you all of you for being here tonight in this crazy, crazy weather. And I hope we'll see you all back in September when Fran Wild and Shiva Kumar are reading, and I will be sitting in the audience.
You have been listening to the Fantastic Fiction at KGB reading series. Check out our website at kgbfantasticfiction.org and click on support if you'd like to help keep the series going. Anyway, that's our show. Thanks for listening, and see you next month.